to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And you don't rise with the pledge of
I
allegiance?
couldn't get out of here. Sorry. I couldn't do both things at one time. I'll make up for it later.
For you to get out of there.
I'll make up for it later.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of February 4th.
I'll make it. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, we need to approve the transfer of monies from the line that we're taking out of the incorrect line, so they need to come out of the municipal dues line. 510 municipal dues, $100 for OCATVC dues, $40 for the NYSSOMFO dues, $180 for the New York State GFOA dues, $50 for the New York State Association of City Village Clerks dues, $40 for the state NYPD dues, and $100 to the Orange County Highway Superintendents. So I'll entertain a motion to make those transfers. A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, no request to meet with the board. Old business. Anybody have anything under old business?
Can we just talk a little bit about, Bruce had said that the two places above Duffy's, that should be cleared out by March the 1st. And it should be, then he's going
Thinking
to look at
February 25th, right?
February 25th.
I think it was March 1st, I think, whichever.
The date changes
Yeah,
a
it should
little
be
bit.
cleared out pretty soon.
Right, and then he'll go in and inspect for compliance and all that. And so he's not here, but, and then the other is the house on Washington Avenue, that should be again in compliance by March the 1st. So, we should be back to just having, I guess the law is even, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Kevin, that even if you're not the owner, if you're renting the house and you're the titled or renter, you're allowed to rent out 2 rooms in the house, just like if you own the house, you can rent 2 rooms to unrelated people.
Even if you're not the owner.
Even if you're not the owner. That's what
Yeah,
that
you
says.
are, as long as you're operating as a single-family home, the accessory use is to allow 2 roomers or boarders.
Okay, I thought you, the owner.
So in other words, if the owner rents to a family, let's say mother, father, and 2 children, and decides that they need some help, whatever, and they could actually rent out 2 rooms to 2 roomers, unrelated. Okay?
But, currently, as far as, from what Kevin had said, from what Bruce had said, the house in Washington had 5
Right.
people renting separately.
Right, and they were not renting it as a single family, they were
Right.
basically renting it as a boarding house,
Right.
correct?
Now,
Which is not allowed.
when we made the law for the Airbnb issue there I think, didn't we say there that in that law that the owner had to be a residence, just like with, when,
Well, no, for an Airbnb, it wouldn't have been, just they would be renting the premises.
okay,
But it was basically short-term rentals,
short-term rental.
where you could actually catch them in between rentals and on a yearly basis when you renew the ability to do that. So they could do inspections and all. This was something totally different.
But
Not renting individual rooms, but renting properties, I should say.
Okay. But in the bed and breakfast situation,
Mhm.
the owner has to be in residence. Is that true, or?
They're supposed to be.
Okay. Can we look at changing the overall law to say that if
You
you're
can
going
look at
to?
it, you want to look at that in this regard, because I think that, and unfortunately, we have situations where, with the one on Washington Avenue, where the owner was renting out individual rooms to individual people, and that was not, that's basically a boarding house.
Right, it definitely was, yeah.
And that's just allowed right now. I mean,
No, it's
that's,
not allowed now, but what is allowed is the 2 roomers or boarders, so long as it's an accessory use to a single-family operation.
no, I think we should look at other samples.
We need to look at, I think
Yeah.
the board would be, as
I was telling them
you adopt your comprehensive plan update, I think that's one of the things you may wanna look at, because because it is causing some issues in the
Yeah.
village.
Yeah, we don't want it to get out of hand, certainly wanna allow certain things like exchange students and things of that nature, but
Yeah,
No,
and again,
not to the extent of-
society has changed that, a family should be defined by blood or marriage, but many people are not married and they're not related by blood, but they're living together as a family unit, and the courts have recognized that as a family for zoning purposes. So that's what you have to be careful of, that you're not going contrary to what the case law is. But where you're individually renting rooms, like this particular person was,
yeah, that's
that
totally.
has no comparison to what we're talking about.
No,
Kevin,
well, we should get some from Nikon, we should look at some
Sure.
sample legislation.
Sure, you can do that.
Kevin, what authority does Bruce have to make sure this is all legit? Is there leases involved
Well,
in here?
well, again, he's got, as a building inspector, when you talk about residential properties, you need to make appointments in order to get into the living units. And if people don't, hopefully people will cooperate, like the owners will cooperate, the lessees will cooperate, so that you can actually get in and see that individual bedrooms aren't being like secured by locks.
Right, but.
Okay, and that's what a boarding house would be, and they're not using cooking facilities within the room itself.
Do they have to present a lease, do they have to show that they have a lease for these three people?
No, because some people rent without leases, and it's,
So then they have to file documents with the IRS or something, I mean,
well, certainly the owners would if they're gaining rental income,
so
yes.
what juice does this board have to make sure this place doesn't turn, the whole village doesn't turn into boarding houses? To
Well,
stop
I
this,
think
nip
it
this in the bud.
requires, first of all, I think it requires an examination of what you really want in this village as far as single-family occupancy and the ability of renting rooms out. That's the first thing, and the next thing is, I think, is to be be vigilant and to actually maybe, when you know there's a rental unit, a house is being rented, to actually see if you can get access to that rental unit by appointment.
Okay, they deny it, they won't let us in,
Then the only alternative you have legally is to get an administrative search warrant, but in order to get that, you need probable cause that there's a violation of the zoning law.
but don't they have to tell us, don't they have to file paperwork with this village that they're renting rooms out?
No, there's nothing in the law that requires them to do that.
How come? How
It's
come there's
just-
nothing, then how do we know that it's legit? This is how neighborhoods fall
Well,
apart.
that's where the vigilance comes in.
Right, but wasn't that one of the reasons that we talked about the Airbnb law?
Yep.
Was to try to get some control so that if someone is renting out rooms, and if, God forbid, there's a fire, and then it comes back to us
It's
because
also,
we're
also to
aware.
catch it because of, sort of the county wants you to catch it for room taxes and for inspection purposes. And because in a single family zone, if you start renting out to transient visitors on a weekly basis sometime, or a monthly basis, because they're Airbnbs, it could upset the neighbors that there's noise because there's parties going on and things like that, and these are strangers that you don't have any idea who they are. So that's why we created the registration law for Airbnbs and short-term rentals. But in the particular case we're talking about, they were renting these on a monthly rooms on a monthly basis, in a single-family home, and they were renting 4 or 5 different bedrooms. Now, how that actually operated, we don't really know, because we weren't in there, but,
We've gotta have some control over this, because the next thing it'll move into one of our
well,
neighborhoods.
again,
and
I
then
think
we'll
that,
be in the
I think
neighborhood.
that this was one example of a property that is not in compliance, and how many more are there, and I think the police department has some concerns about transients. I'm calling them transients because they have short-term rentals of a room, causing issues with, other issues, not zoning law issues, but let's say criminal law issues, disturbances and.
We can't put anything into effect here that if you're renting out your house, you have to have a lease. You're renting.
No,
rooms, it has to be a
because
lease.
again, real property law that doesn't require, at least people do rentals all the time without having quote-unquote leases. It's sort of a lease by understanding.
Yeah, but people go through red lights too.
Yeah, but it's also up to the person renting that they
I
don't
think
have the
right now
protections
this
of a lease.
village is in beautiful shape because people are keeping it that way, but
Correct.
things
I-
fall apart.
I think-
We
I-
don't stop it at this level.
Mike, I don't disagree with you. I think we need to look at everything.
Yeah, I think we need to
And
revisit
as
the
you do
local
your
law.
zoning laws, pursuant to the comprehensive plan, I think these are some of the issues you need to look at.
You know,
And I think that's a good idea to look at them. I think Steve's right, you should look and see what other communities have done. But you also have to be careful because case law is very clear about what a quote-unquote family unit is. It's not by blood, by marriage anymore, because society has changed. So the courts have changed with it. So as I gave Steve an example, I gave Walter an example when we talked, was that if you have 4 college students who decide they want to live off campus, and they're not related by blood, marriage, or any other thing, but they just decide they want to live, and they decide to pool their resources and live in a single-family home. They can do that. The law says they're acting as a single family, provided that they're all living as that unit, that they'll all share the kitchen, the bathrooms, the bedrooms, they share the rent, they share everything.
This-
for the
We
whole
can't, we
premises.
can't adopt anything that's more restrictive than the code allows, the state code allows.
Of course not. Of
Unless we
course
get
not. But I wanna
permission
make
from
sure
the
we're
state of
covering
New York.
everything on that.
Right.
When you mentioned the college, now, when I ran a district in Newburgh, my area was at South Liberty Street, we had Mount St. Mary's College in there. And I used to have to deal with this on my level, on fraternity houses being rented out,
Sure.
college houses. And when you went in there, a lot of times, most of the time, the place was owned by somebody in another state. And they had one kid collecting rent, so 4 people living in there with 10, 12, 15, and we got them out.
Well, again, it depends upon the I mean, there's also building code issues and fire code issues about what the capacity of a home is, or the spaces. So if you have a space that's allowed for 4 people or 5 people, you can't have 15 people in it. Just like at a common space like this, you
No,
have.
I know, I just don't wanna see us go, be back here 6 months from now.
Mike, I don't disagree with you. I think that I think what we're finding is that we need to look at and re-examine and see what there's some refinements we can make to the code that will
Yeah, we'll consider, we'll look at
that will
those.
prevent any further abuses of, say, for instance, a boarding house, or boarding houses popping up all over.
Fair enough, but
Okay?
Okay.
All right, we'll look at it. Okay, consider adopting local introductory law number 1 of 2020, a local law amending chapter 122 of the Code of the Village of Montgomery entitled zoning to establish limits on the number of window signs permitted in all business and industrial districts. And we talked about this a few years ago, and now we're looking to codify it in the code, because some of these business windows are getting out of hand, so. We have the introduction, we'll have the public hearing at the next meeting, correct? You wanna give us any more
If you
synopsis
introduce it
on it?
tonight, we'll put a public hearing, set a public hearing for next meeting.
Okay.
So again, as I said to all of you in my email to you, when I sent you the draft, it was that, my understanding was that we want to have no more than 25% of the window space, whether it's individual windows like these 3, or one big window, no more than 25% of the window space can be covered by signs, whatever the owner likes.
So one out of these are 2 over 2, so one panel could have a,
Correct. If you had, so if a business had 3 of these, they could have 1/4 of each one of them, or they could have, if they had one big one, they could have 1/4 of the big one. That's the max.
that's the way it's stated in this.
That's what we're trying to do here.
All right, any questions before we set the, public hearing, next meeting? Next meeting, Kevin, or 2 meetings hence, you think?
Now, I think if you introduce it tonight, we certainly can, we have plenty of time to set a public hearing.
First meeting in March is March 3rd. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to
Introduce it,
introduce it then?
and then set it.
Okay, motion to introduce, I'm sorry.
All right, I'll make the motion to introduce.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried.
And then,
And a public hearing at 7:15, say, at the next meeting? If we run past 7:30, so be it, but I'll entertain a motion for 7:15 at March 3rd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, carried.
you must prepare the notice and get it to you, so you can publish in the paper, okay?
Okay.
Okay. And the Chamber Music Series is, February 23rd. Okay. Senior Center, of course. All right, anything else before we go to public portion? Okay, public portion. Yes, Don.
Yeah, a couple of things, Steve. The comp plan that you sent to the Orange County planner, has that been, come back yet, or what?
It hasn't. I talked to Dave Church, I think it was a day or 2 days after that meeting, and he said, they didn't receive it, so now they got it, like, we physically brought it over there, right?
Yeah, that time.
That day, so, they're working on it. I haven't heard from Dave. I know he's there for a couple more weeks, I believe, but remind me, I will call him again tomorrow.
Okay. Also, Could you give me the status of the cumulative traffic study that has been requested by residents and the planner? Have we gone to the town yet?
We received a letter from the state of New York, basically. I think that we have a copy of that letter that we received from the state of New York.
Yes,
Yeah, it basically told us what we already knew, and
Yes.
that's it, so. I don't know what you mean, we sent to the town a while ago?
It's been a while, it was in October. And I asked the town board if they received any communications from the village, and they said no. So what we're talking about is when church was here, we were talking about having the county, the village, and the town have a cumulative traffic study together and try to plan that together and do it. I don't know if the state has to do it, that's just something that I thought that David Church had suggested, and that the county would reimburse part of that to the village and the town for that study. And, I mean, I have all the documentation, the letters that you originally sent.
Okay, well, we'll follow up with that, I know,
but
I
that was
believe
the
that the,
reply.
Mike had a joint meeting on the traffic as far as the signage and everything like that, but they didn't talk about too much about cumulative.
No,
Traffic.
that was their reply to your letter to them.
Was that the
DOT.
state or?
That
no,
was DOT.
That was DOT, we're talking about with the town doing it.
All right, talk to Sean Mears today, he's gonna get back to you within a week.
Okay.
also, I think the planning board
I'll have the truck broke down.
If I'm correct,
He was there when I was talking.
also hired an outside consultant to do a cumulative traffic study as well, correct? That
Are you talking about
encompasses
of the village?
the village, right?
No, no,
I
because
thought that study took in not just KSH, but also took into consideration the Chandler Lane project
right,
and,
yeah, but it's not a comprehensive plan, it's just really the intersection that the planning board deemed that they should look at. So it'd be, for instance, from the Montgomery Elementary School, like you said, Chandler Lane, the traffic, anticipated traffic from there. And they do a build, no build comparison to what it would be like. And then we picked out the intersection here at Union and Ward, and also the anticipated traffic from the warehouses, down the southern part of 17K. So a lot of that data is in that traffic study, but it's not cumulative with the whole town. It's just
Yeah.
really particular to that one KSH project.
Yeah, for us to do a comprehensive traffic study, it's gonna be over $50,000.
But I think what Don is referring to, when Dave Church was here, he had
Right, he did say about the
something
grant
like
funds,
the
yeah.
Transportation Council
Yeah.
can put money aside to do kind of a study like that.
Yeah.
We need, and that's why we wrote the letter to the state saying we'd like your endorsement, so to speak, of us doing that kind of a study, and what the Transportation Council doing that kind of study and funding for it. And I think the answer was,
well, the state basically said that they don't review it until an owner of the property submits a seeker and all of the documentation that goes with it, then they will review the seeker data.
But keep in mind, what we were talking here was, forget about the state, that the town, village, and county was going to invest and do our own study. The state has been bogging down in this study for over a year. So that's why, part of the reason the church came here, that we put that request in, was to get this thing moving forward.
right, but that was to get, we had to write a letter to the state asking them to support that study so that the Orange County Transportation Council can contribute money for that study. Don, that's my recollection of it.
Yeah, I kind of remember.
And that's why we wrote the letter to the state, and I don't think we've ever heard from the state about that particular, whether it goes to the Orange County Transportation Council, I don't know, Steve, but that's what I think we wrote the letter for, to get that study
The
going.
thing that I think in December I talked to you guys about, what my fear was, is that because David Church came in here and he was on the brink of retiring, that whole concept would be lost. And we talked about that, and now he is retired, and I don't know, again, who is taking that place. I had asked you.
I think they're close to, the county exec's close to
Appointing somewhere.
appointing someone, yes. So, I mean, we can make sure that it doesn't get forgotten, but I mean, getting money from OCTC is gonna be kind of difficult
So
too.
that was what he had suggested, to help fund that
I mean,
study.
they allocate, yeah, they might grant a little bit, but I mean, they grant money for bridges and sidewalk, major things.
Right, but that's what he was, I
Yeah,
guess.
all right, remind me to call, when I'm on the road tomorrow morning, I'll call Dave. and I'll ask him what's going on with that too, okay?
Steve, is Dave still actually working on that?
Yeah, I think he's done this month, I think he's working until the end of the month, I
Oh.
think, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's still helping out for the transition.
Alright.
Steve, another thing, we never got in from the county planning department about the airport and the flight path, and to change our zoning, our zoning map.
We never got a recommendation with the height.
We never got
I
a-
just,
we never got a
as we talk
revised
about
map
it,
from-
that's another thing we never
We're
got
supposed
anything
to do
clarified.
a revised map, because that map is incorrect.
Right.
Yeah.
For both us and the town, the map's incomplete, and as you know, they were supposed to. we
They're
never
pushing
really
us on the
got-
census now, you know, in the planning
Well,
department.
that's, yeah,
Which is important, I
Of
get
course,
it, you know,
of course.
it's kinda simple what the questions that residents have to answer.
right.
And we're certainly gonna do a push from our end too, maybe John Tracy can bring something when he delivers the newsletter at the end of the month as well to encourage, because we do get grant money from, you know, each resident, so. All right, I will ask Dave about that, what's the status of that, and where we go once he leaves, to try to get some money for, to help fund transportation stuff. I know Mike's moving along from his end, but that's.
Well, my end is just like I put, we've got signs up around here, we've got 2 private property owners that will let us put signs on there. I'm not gonna do it until I see if this project goes through. If this project goes through, we will put signs on their property, and one of the signs will say, notice truckers, DOT enforcement, DOT violations strictly enforced, next right. So this would be on 416, showing the truckers, you can't, or you can, at your own risk, make a right into the village of Montgomery. What my hope is that they would go to the left, towards Middletown. That's what I wanna do, it's cost $300 for the sign, so we've got 2 people out there, we've got 3 of them around the village already here. The police chief, or our future police chief, we had conversations with this, and he has the state police, like we had suggested, coming in here at different times to enforce DOT violations right here, or anywhere in the village. And he's gonna specifically target dates that, Walkville has their DOT enforcement out there. Forget the guys who are sneaking through here with bad brakes, bad tires, whatever.
Do you mean town of Waltham?
Town of Walkville.
Town of Waltham, or is the Hamlet?
I'm sorry,
I didn't know whether you were referring to Hamlet or town.
the DOT on 84.
Okay.
The way station.
So that's what we're gonna do here. And we'll see from there. Right now, if, like I said, if these projects goes through, I'm hoping we're ready. If they don't go through, we're ready. Either way, there's people out who want these projects to go through, and there's people who don't. But I know this, I don't want the stuff going through here. So, I think we all agree on something like that, we're doing our best to keep it out, or to keep it under control. Now, we are fighting with GPSs. We are fighting with GPSs, and I can mention at the last meeting, and I haven't heard it since then, on the CB radio, I heard, Montgomery, Village of Montgomery, speed trap again, don't go through there, I can go through there. And, yeah, truckers talking back and forth, well, go through at your own risk. So let's hope this gets out there.
Well, today, coming out of Goodwill on 17K, there was a tractor trailer there, but he looked like he was really lost.
You know,
And I think it was an inadvertent one. He wasn't
That
trying to.
happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, he was kind of stuck trying to get out of there. I had to actually stop and let him out.
Stuff happens. I mean,
Yeah.
I went through the middle of DC with a motorhome because GPS told us to do that. So, what are you gonna do with something like that? But the creek was coming through here with bad tires, illegal stuff, suspended licenses, stuff like that. That's what I want. I don't want them coming through here. I don't want them coming through here, and that's that. Now, we were kind of, the way we put the sign, one on Freda Street, because you can't put it on the state road, it's on Freda Street, it's facing a little bit towards the airport. To have the guy think, hey, I don't wanna go down Chandler Lane towards Freda Street, or I don't wanna go this way. The other one on 17K, it's put off to the side. Somebody might say, gee, why didn't you put it in the right lane? Well, we can't. So we gotta be a little cute and legal by doing this. So it says, notice, the notice violation, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you did say you can put it on somebody's property if they give you the okay.
Correct.
So I think all of us who would like to see the trucks not come through here know plenty of people who have property on 70K and 211 that would say,
It's gotta
sure.
It's gotta be a certain amount of feet off the road.
Right. What are the parameters, and I'll start asking
Oh,
people.
is it 50 feet?
Yeah, we don't wanna get carried away with signs on every property.
No,
right?
I'm just saying that if we can put it on a property that makes sense, you
Yeah,
know,
Yeah.
and somebody's willing to put it on their property.
Absolutely, absolutely, but I don't wanna look like election day, where there's signs all over the place, like this guy, like that.
No, well, you're making the sign, so you know how many you're making, right? Yeah.
Saying maybe they can find people who will
Absolutely.
put
Can
them in
you?
the right place.
Well, that just give me the information. I'll start asking people.
$50 a sign, so I wanna be careful and spend.
You said last meeting or that I attended,
three of them in the garage,
you have a
so-
couple already.
Three still
Yeah.
in the garage.
But she said if you tell her where you wanna put them, then maybe.
No, what the parameters are, like off the street.
15 feet, Buddy knows.
I think it's 15 feet off of the, center line.
Yeah,
Something like
I think Sean told me it was 30, it's pretty deep.
Sean's working on his.
Yeah, it's probably 15 feet,
Yeah.
feet off the side of the road, but it's like 30 feet off the center line. Yeah, Sean told me
I would
that
like
too.
one put up on the corner, on the little island across from the auto body place. But some guy in California owns that, where Hefner's always puts a sign. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Auto
Four
body.
16, 211,
16 to 11. Okay.
that little triangle thing.
Isn't that
No, it's just a pretty big guy.
Marcinek? Whatever, Marcinek?
That's the trucking place.
Sun on the
Off,
side, yeah.
they're talking about the little island in the middle. where-
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know.
You can't do it on the island, that's the thing.
Yeah.
So if we can put them around, and we can.
Yeah, we got a couple of places that.
Or something that even says trucks local delivery only, or something, you know,
Well,
to
that they can do. That they can do. They can
Okay,
do.
yeah, like
But our police
like
chief
work
did-
with the DOT and what signs they are willing to put out there, like no trucks beyond this point, as far unless local delivery down on Bridge Street, because didn't a couple of people say that they were coming through like off the bridge and going down Bridge Street and coming up Clinton Street and stuff to avoid the light? I don't know.
Well, like I mentioned before, a big headway here was our police chief reached out
Charles.
to the state police, DOT, because not everybody's DOT certified, and you don't have to be DOT certified. If the truck does something wrong, I was never DOT certified, you pull him over and you go from there. What did he do wrong, first of all? He did something illegal, something violation, then you snoop from there. What is this? I want to see your license.
Oh, they're coming through pretty fast. I'm sure they can give them a speeding ticket too, the way they're coming
Well,
through
well,
lately.
Well, you're looking for, yeah, the speeding ticket, but then you can build on that. His license is suspended, and you go from there. You don't just stop
Mhm.
on that. And now that the DOT is gonna, DOT, state police is gonna hook up with our guys, I think we're ahead of the game here on that. I mean, I don't know too many other communities who are actually, doing that. And then we'll
All right,
go from
let's,
there.
anything else? Yeah.
Something else.
Yeah, it's-
Again, a few months ago, Kevin, you took the lead on this one, was the rezoning of open space properties, and we talked at length about that, probably back in early December. And you said as long as things aren't shovel ready, you could change zoning. And so the talk here before the board and the residents was that, well, let's move ahead and get all this open space, identify what the open space is, and perhaps if we need be, to do that.
It's not open, it's industrial zones.
Well, whatever it is.
Yeah.
What I mean by, I guess I use the wrong phrase, what I mean by open space is vacant properties,
Undeveloped.
alright?
Under
Yeah,
the property.
right.
But
And
the
have we
plan,
moved forward on anything
yes, we
like that?
have. The master plan subcommittee has that on their agenda and is working on that as we speak.
Okay.
We need to work on that soon, so
Yeah, we'll come up with some recommendations and
we can't wait
the
too
committee
long
will
on
bring
that.
that to the board.
Yeah, once the.
I talked to Kevin about it too as well, a couple months ago, I think it was. Okay. All right, nothing else, I'd like to entertain a motion to go in, attorney-client privilege or for the agreement,
Yes.
attorney-client privilege, okay, motion with Kevin.
I'll make it.
What is it on?
Second.
Attorney-client to discuss legal matters. The contract.
Thank you.